Me in the back rows? Loud and clear? Should we talk about rhetorical strategies tonight? You tired of that? Today we get to hear the poetry, not just analyze the poetry. So I think you'll enjoy it. So I just want to welcome students, faculty, esteemed guests, Richard, Lisa. Thanks for flying out of the minus 30 degrees Celsius cold Calgary weather to join us here in the San Joaquin Valley today. So for those of you who don't know, Calgary is in the province of Alberta, Canada, and right now it is basically permafrost. Everything is frozen. So Richard is actually very happy for this reprieve from the weather. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Zaid Schlaw. I've been teaching here now for 4 years, mostly composition, literature, and critical thinking. And I am very proud and honored, especially as a fellow Canadian and Calgarian myself, to be here this evening to share with you from the award-winning poet, professor, and essayist Richard Harrison, and to continue in the fine tradition of excellence at MJC, which has brought local and internationally recognized and award-winning writers to complement our students' education. So I think we're really lucky that we get to do this every year, and I'm glad that you guys took the opportunity to try an experience that maybe would enrich your educations and give you a complement to what you're learning inside the classroom. I think you're gonna, from the previous class today, this afternoon, you're really gonna enjoy today's presentation. In terms of just general logistics, we're going to be here for about 3 hours, no, about an hour and a half. I'll speak for about 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and then Richard will speak for about 45 minutes, sharing his poetry. Afterwards, we'll do a brief Q&A, so you guys will have an opportunity to ask questions that might help with the papers that you're working on, or just general questions that you have, reactions that you have from the poetry that you've heard today. We have 2 mics working, I think. Tatiana Stovall over there, who's part of my committee, and Daisy Carter also will be helping with the mics, and they'll come around, just put your hand up, and they'll take your question. Afterwards, you are also invited to come down after the Q&A and purchase a book. So we have some of Richard Harrison's books here. I think I did tell some students originally that there was credit. There's no credit. So we might do some bartering, we'll talk, but they will take your cash happily. And Richard would be very honored, I'm sure, to sign you an autographed copy of his Governor General award-winning book, right here, on not losing my father's ashes in the flood. Before we formally introduce Richard, I'd just like to make sure everybody's phones are silenced. Take a moment now just to check so we don't disrupt the presentation. And I just have a few thank yous that I'd like to go through before we get into the poetry. So the MJC Visiting Author Series is brought to us from the Associated Students of MJC, who's been supportive of our program from the beginning. I'd like to thank my Dean, Jillian Daly. Where are you? Over there. So we're lucky to have a Dean who's always supported literature and enriching our students' lives through poetry and other medium, not just composition. And also I would like to just take a little bit of time to introduce those committee members who are here. It's important to recognize that events like this don't just happen by themselves. I didn't do it all. We are a collaborative committee, and we have been so since the beginning. So everybody's been willing to pitch in and go above and beyond to help make this event possible. So just put your names up, colleagues, and I will point you out, and then at the end, everybody please, a round of applause. I see Tatiana Stovall and Teresa, Dr. Teresa Rojas, Dr. Dan Schmidt over there, Dr. Jim Beggs. Who else is with us today? Daisy, of course, who pretty much makes sure that this place runs every morning for us. so that we can do what we do. Other members I should mention are Professors Bruce Anders, Professor Gabby Steiner, who is not with us today. Did I get everybody? Yes, we must also take time to thank everybody in facilities, those things that go on behind the scenes that we don't see. So we have facilities, we have our media representatives with us, Sergio and Vincent. And we also have Shami, who will be helping us with book sales today. She's our book sales representative. And then I also want to thank custodial services for the work that they do to keep our facility and our institution clean. Yes, let's do that. But before I go further, I need to air a grievance. So it's a touchy subject for me, being a Canadian. But the polite Canadian has a complaint. You probably thought I would just keep quiet, but it's 4 years since I've been working here. And I think there's a Canadian language deficit going on here. So I just want to take the time to familiarize my students with certain terms that would make me feel, you know, like I'm back home. So double-double, for example. How many of you associate that with In-N-Out Burger? It's not a hamburger. Richard, what is a double-double? And what does it mean?
No cream, no sugar.
Thank you. So if you want to make me happy in the morning, get me a double-double. This is one that my students know as we're moving towards bilingualism. They're becoming more familiar with this term. So I think now they know it's an insult to refer to a knit cap as a beanie. Okay, you don't want to do that when you cross the border. What do we call it, my students? No, don't say toque. That might get you in trouble. What is it? Toque. Say it with a Canadian accent. Toque. T-O-U-Q-U-E. Toque. Another thing, the letter Z. My name begins with the letter Z, and it has been mispronounced since I started working here. So it's Z-A-I-D. That would make me feel, you know, like I'm at home again. Try to do that if you can. And then this one is the hardest for me. This is the most difficult. Sometimes I'll be at home, and I'll tune into a Calgary Flames game. And I'll come to work, and the hallways will be silent. No one says anything. They talk about the Niners, the Warriors. I'm not interested in that. So next time, oh, my lovely wife, Randa Schlaw, made it to the event in reverse commute traffic, so thank you. Wow, thank you. You took me off my speech now. What was I saying? Flames, yes. Sometimes, and Randa will now watch hockey with me, actually. She never used to. So I'll be watching the game, and I'll hear Niners and Warriors, and my colleagues won't say anything. So what I'd like my colleagues to maybe try to practice next time I watch a hockey game is just come up to me casually and say, "The Flames played a wicked game, eh?" Okay? Not awesome, wicked. That's the adjective to use. Sound good? Can you do that for me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Joking aside, I'm very proud to introduce Richard. Before I do that, I just want to talk about a personal relationship that we share. About when I was a college student like you, maybe about 5 years ago, I was installing oil and gas software for a big corporation called EDS. I have been doing that for about 5 years. But I wasn't content, and I wasn't really fulfilled. I wasn't happy with it. I had continued to write since I was young, but it's not something that I ever thought I could pursue as a vocation, and the teaching that would go along with it to contribute it. So I enrolled into a workshop, a local writing workshop, and the instructor at the time referred me to an author. She said, "You should go and meet Richard Harrison and sign up to a community college class in creative writing." And so I looked up Richard. I heard he's doing this reading event in downtown Calgary, and I have nobody to go with. So I forced my sister to go with me, and she hates poetry. So I made my sister come with me, and after the reading, I meekly went up to Richard, and I said, you know, Richard, I heard that you're an instructor, and I'm interested in writing. What should I do? And he told me about this workshop that he's been teaching at Mount Royal, and he gave me a few suggestions, said that I'd be welcome to join and enroll, and I did. And short story, long story short, 20 years long story short, he is now here reading at the college that I am now teaching at. So it's for me, it's a very remarkable moment, and I just would like to say the takeaway, I think, for all of you that I'd like to share with you is that a community college is a great place, and Modesto Junior College is a great place, and there's a place and a sharing that goes on. Your instructors are all excellent in their area of expertise. They go beyond the call of duty. They're genuinely interested in your success. When I was in college, community college, Mount Royal College, that course actually gave me a voice. It taught me that my voice could make a difference and that I had something to offer. And I think it can do the same for you. Now, literature might not be your calling, but take the opportunities that present themselves, take advantage of the resources, go to the extracurricular meetings, and ultimately just pursue what interests you, and the rest will happen. Of course, I was lucky. I got to work with a great mentor, a friend, a fellow inspiring writer who ultimately became a role model and sometimes sounding board for a lot of the trials and tribulations that I was going through on my way to becoming an instructor of English. But moving on, finally, I would like to now introduce Richard formally. Richard Harrison's 8 books include the Governor General's Award finalist Big Breath of a Wish and Hero of the Play, and of course the book that we are reading today, On Not Losing My Father's Ashes in the Flood. A lot of themes that we've been discussing and talking about this semester, the students have been working hard with. One of the questions that they were asking me is, why poetry? I don't get it. And rather than me telling you that story, I think the answer will be to introduce award-winning writer and poet Richard Harrison.
Well, thank you, Zaid, and thank you all for coming out tonight. And I'd like to echo Zaid's thanks to the committee for their hard work to keep a program like this alive. Far beyond any individual writer, just having something like this where people can come and enjoy literature for literature's own sake is a really essential part of the arts. It's part of the world that we need to keep alive. I'm going to say something about my friend Zaid here. He's as complaining as he was, and unusual as that is for a countryman. He is also suitably Canadianly modest, because along the way, the journey that Zaid describes, and now, magic. The journey that Zaid describes are 2 wonderful books of poetry. And I know he's too modest, he won't put them on his courses or anything, but if you are looking up books to read of poetry, his first book, Taksim, T-A-Q-S-I-M, a book so fine it was published twice, once in the United States and once in Canada. And his most recent book, Clockwork, a book of essays on the nature of poetry, interspersed with his own fine poetry as well. So that too is something that, as a teacher, even having the small part that a teacher has, it makes me extremely proud to be part of that story. So congratulations again, Zaid. I am going to read, the majority of the work I'm going to read tonight is going to be from On Not Losing My Father's Ashes in the Flood. But as the hour came closer that I would be here, I started getting letters and notes about things Canadian. So I'm just going to pick up a little bit from Zaid there, and I'm going to just dedicate 2 poems to my new friend, Jim Ebbs there, who has been asking me a lot about matters hockey, and I talked a little bit about that in his class. But I want to just share with you a couple of poems from this book, Hero of the Play, which is a book of poetry I wrote because I was really interested. Poets are always really interested in language. How far can you push the possibility of saying something in a language? And for Canadians, hockey is a language. And there's a lot of Canadian poets who will use an occasional metaphor for it, but I wanted to see if I could write a whole book in that language and see how far I could get it to work. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but that's the nature of the experiment. Hero of the Play was published in 1994, and in next year, my press is bringing out a 25th anniversary edition of this book. It's been in print for 25 years. Stanley Cup. At the center of the circle of the champions of the world, Mario Lemieux hoists the cup, kisses its silver thigh. The names of men where his will soon be cut, where the finish pure as a mirror. Around him, the tumult. And Scotty Bowman, the winningest coach in the NHL, named his first son Stanley when his Canadians won it in '73 with a Stonewall blue line and a dizzying transition game. Every player on every team who has ever won the cup gets to take it home. It is partied on front lawns, beside swimming pools, and in the trunks of cars. And even the guy who left it by the side of the road and drove away, still, he thinks of it as holy. And that word, holy, appears most in the conversation of veterans who know how the touch fades, the shoulder takes longer between days of easy movement. How Bobby Hull passed on his only chance to drink champagne from its lip when the Hawks won it in '61 because he thought there'd be so many in his life. Some take the cup apart, clean the rings, make minor repairs in their basements, and then inscribe on the inside of the column the unofficial log of their intimate knowledge. This way, I have loved you. The hockey world responded very well to this book, and I actually got a chance to read that poem right next to the Stanley Cup itself. And speaking of right next to, we talked about some of the greats of the game, and one of the greats, maybe the greatest of all the greats, was Maurice Richard, Rocket Richard. Does that name still ring a bell at all? Rocket Richard? No? Rocket anything? Anyway, Rocket Richard, Maurice Richard, known as the Rocket, he was the first guy to score 50 goals in 50 games, which is the standard of goal scoring excellence, more than excellence, superlativeness. 50 goals in 50 games, and in those days, they only played 50 games. So he scored a goal in every game he played that season. And it took another 30 years before another player did that. As part of the consequence of this book, I got asked to write a series of poems for Maurice Richard and the other 3 greats, Jean Beliveau, Bobby Hull, and Gordie Howe. And I read those poems to them. They came to my city to be honored together. And it was the first time and only time that all 4 had ever been honored at once, because Gordie and Maurice, they hated each other. So I got a chance to meet them, and this is a poem about the Rocket. Rocket Richard actually died 2 months after that event. Elegy for the Rocket. For a minute or two, I spoke with him, Maurice Richard, the month before he died. He told me his legs were gone from the medicine. The room was crowded and hot. I brought him water and dared that moment to look right into those famous eyes, so dark with their official color, they looked pure pupil. We've all heard men say they were a fire like coal, and maybe it was that language that affected me, because what came to mind as I considered the gray lace woven where the iris is lined with muscle was the way briquettes burn out under the grill. Such a little image, I know. And in the tranquil now, I can conjure charred wood veined with burnt-out embers, or the remains of a home set ablaze rather than surrendered out of war and peace, a book worthy of the public stature of the man. But the truth is, up close, not staring me down to score a goal, those eyes were a humble fire at the end of its use. And all the ferocity of the man and his reputation couldn't hide in his fading light what they also knew, who lined up by the thousand round the forum to say farewell, and wept on all the streets, ringing Notre Dame at his passing. So, I don't know, again, how much news got down here, but in 2013, Alberta was hit with the largest flood of its history. It was the largest single natural disaster in Canadian life. And the flood came down from the mountains and swept through the Bow River and right into my house. And so it flooded out everything. It took away everything in the people's houses. I don't know if you got pictures of it, but the pictures you saw of Houston, they were like the pictures of Calgary. And in fact, our experience in Calgary, we sent a whole lot of people down to Houston to help out with the kind of flooding that it was. And I had been writing a book. I'd been trying to write a book, and I thought, well, what am I going to do with it? And I thought, well, I'll write a book, a poet writing a book about poems. That's cool. So I tried that for a while. And I write fairly autobiographically. So my father, who you will meet in this reading, was dying of vascular dementia. So he was losing his memory, and one by one the switches were going off in the functions that kept him alive. This is my dad's sense of humor. They first thought it was Alzheimer's, but then he lived too long, and he got a kick out of that. Then they thought it was Lewy body syndrome, but he lived too long. Got a kick out of that. And then we found out what it was. And so that time between us actually gave us more time to talk. And so the last years of my father's life are in this book. There's some poems about poetry, and then there's a poem about the flood. Because what happens with a natural disaster, of course, is it upsets every plan you have about your life and every concept you have about human control. On not losing my father's ashes in the flood. We couldn't find my father's ashes during the flood of 2013 and thought they had been swept away. Or maybe one of the volunteers, there only to do good, saw the jar that held them covered with silt and threw it out, as it went with so many things people cared for in the buried treasure of their homes. Family photographs, manual typewriters, diplomas under glass. After the river left our house, two of my wife's friends took apart our piano, which was waterlogged and could not be saved. And the piano, being demolished, made a concert from the jugular grief of crowed wood, the broken memory of glue, and the squeal of screws no longer holding fast. It ended with the crash of the great harp onto a crib of concrete. A zoo in panic. Every note the piano knew climaxed at once, every animal howling as the river rose in their cages. At the news of my father's ashes lost to the water, my neighbors winced like something wild had eaten a pet they'd all fed from their hands. But a friend from Poland thought it was hilarious, and so did I. We both come from a long line of cannon fodder. Dad would have laughed too. I'd kept his ashes because nothing I'd thought to do with them was right. He used to say, "If you wait, things will solve themselves. The trick is knowing when to wait." I was reading Robert Haas's elegy for his younger brother, with Robert's mind caught up imagining a funeral in which his brother's body was burned on a boat in the river. So first the fire, then the air, and then finally the river took the body, as if downstream was another word for heaven. We found the jar in a box of books and a remote-controlled car, taken to the kitchen where everyone grabbed everything above the waterline. It had never been touched by the river. And now it sits on a shelf in my living room. And now it sits on a shelf in my living room. My father's ashes, not taken by the flood, that I will not give to the air until I have learned all he has to teach me with the last part of the earth that was him. Zaid, you drank all the water. It's in the bag. Oh, excuse me a moment. Oh, will now serve himself. Thanks. All that flood and I want to drink. In a previous life, I had a degree in biology. So I've always been interested in animal life and paleontology. So here's a poem in the arms of Tyrannosaurus Rex. I was a boy when the dinosaurs dragged their deadweight tails through the museums of knowledge, so suffocating their mass, the marvel of it was they lived at all. But by the time I got to university, they had evolved. Those tails rose from the mud and stuck straight out like yardarms, and they did a yardarm's work. The old monsters leapt up and raced, sleek Olympians. Out with the Frankensteinian shuffle and moan, in with hot-footing it after a jeep, roaring like three tenors into an oil drum. And now that I am the age of my students' fathers, the terrible lizards have clothed themselves in brilliant feathers, them and all their descendants who hatch from the symbols of birth and grow singing into the symbols of freedom. Everything changes, even extinction. But through it all, a constant, the tiny arms of Tyrannosaurus Rex. Everybody loves those arms, part puzzle, part mystery, part joke, hands that reach neither mouth nor prey, ridiculous limbs that interrupt the symmetry of an otherwise streamlined aesthetic, like the penis of a naked man in profile. Someday, check out the skeleton of a whale. There are